David Gilmour was never the kind of musician who demanded attention. He didn't rely on shock, speed, or spectacle to make people listen. Instead, he let space, emotion, and restraint do the work. In a genre often defined by volume and bravado, Gilmour chose subtlety. His guitar didn't shout, it whispered, sighed, and lingered. Every note felt intentional, shaped by patience and feeling rather than technical display. When audiences hear the solo from Comfortably Numb, they don't admire complexity. They feel something deeper, something personal. That was always his gift. Gilmour understood that music could speak directly to the heart without saying a word. He carried himself with quiet dignity, avoiding scandal and excess, allowing the work to stand on its own. This is not simply the story of a legendary guitarist. It is the story of how gentleness, emotional honesty, and persistence can create echoes that last for generations. A childhood framed by silence and thought. David John Gilmour was born on March 6, 1946, in Cambridge, England, a city known for scholarship and quiet reflection. His father, Douglas, was a zoologist and university lecturer, while his mother, Sylvia, worked as a journalist and later taught film studies. Their home was filled with books, ideas, and intellectual discussion, yet emotional expression was limited. David grew up surrounded by knowledge, but often felt unseen. There was no dramatic hardship, just a quiet distance that shaped his inner world. Conversations at the dinner table leaned toward academics rather than feelings, and young David learned early to retreat inward. He became observant, thoughtful, and self-contained. These early years planted the seeds of introspection that would later define his music. He learned to listen closely, to people, to silence, and eventually to sound itself. That sensitivity would become his greatest strength. Finding refuge in strings and sound school never truly captured David's imagination. He drifted through classrooms without standing out, neither rebellious nor exceptional. What did capture him was music. His tastes were wide and curious, stretching from Elvis Presley and the Everly Brothers to American blues and folk records. At around 10 years old, his mother gave him a guitar, and everything began to change. Without formal lessons, he taught himself through radio broadcasts, instruction books, and endless repetition. Hours passed unnoticed as he practiced alone in his room, slowly discovering how sound could mirror emotion. Music became more than entertainment. It became refuge. Through those strings, he could express what he struggled to say aloud. Loneliness transformed into melody, confusion into harmony. Each small improvement felt like progress towards something larger, even if he didn't yet know what that was. The guitar became his voice, his companion, and his quiet escape. Syd Barrett and the Spark of Friendship. While studying art in Cambridge, David met Syd Barrett, whose creativity and charisma left a lasting impression. The two bonded over long jam sessions and shared musical curiosity. Barrett was spontaneous and imaginative, while David was steady and reflective. Their differences balanced each other, creating a friendship rooted in mutual respect. Syd introduced David to broader artistic ideas, while David offered grounding presence. When Barrett later formed Pink Floyd, their connection remained strong. David often joined rehearsals and informal sessions, absorbing the group's experimental spirit. At the time, none of them imagined how deeply their lives would intertwine. Barrett's brilliance helped shape Pink Floyd's early identity, and David quietly learned from watching him. That friendship would eventually lead David into the band under difficult circumstances, but in those early days, it was simply two young artists discovering sound together, unaware of how fragile genius could be. Stepping into uncertainty. Before fame arrived, David lived modestly, playing in small groups and scraping by through temporary jobs. Money was scarce, but music remained constant. His playing already carried a rare emotional depth, drawing attention even in intimate venues. In 1967, Pink Floyd faced a crisis as Syd Barrett's mental health declined, making live performances increasingly difficult. David was invited to join as a second guitarist, originally meant to support Barrett on stage. The transition was painful and complicated, shaped by friendship and necessity. When Barrett ultimately left the band in 1968, David found himself stepping into a role no one truly wanted to fill. He didn't try to replace Syd's personality or style. Instead, he quietly brought his own voice, honoring what came before while guiding the band forward. It was a moment of responsibility, not ambition, and it changed everything. Building a new musical identity. The early years with Pink Floyd were experimental and uncertain. Albums like A Saucer Full of Secrets, More, and Umaguma reflected a band searching for direction. David approached this period with patience, allowing his guitar to evolve naturally within the group's expanding sound. By the time metal arrived in 1971, his influence was unmistakable. The track echoes showcased his ability to weave emotion through extended compositions, balancing atmosphere with melody. He wasn't interested in dominating songs, he focused on serving them. Critics slowly began to recognize his importance, though David himself remained reserved. He rarely sought interviews or spotlight. Instead, he concentrated on texture, tone, and feeling. These formative years taught him discipline and collaboration. They also confirmed his belief that music worked best when it left space for listeners to breathe, reflect, and find their own meaning. The breakthrough of Dark Side of the Moon. In 1973, Pink Floyd released The Dark Side of the Moon, and everything changed. The album became a cultural phenomenon, but its success was built on years of quiet experimentation. David's guitar work gave emotional shape to abstract themes of time, anxiety, and human connection. He didn't write most of the lyrics, yet his playing translated concepts into feeling. Tracks like Time and Breathe carried his signature touch, slow bends, sustained notes, and careful phrasing that lingered long after the music ended. He understood restraint better than excess, allowing silence to become part of the conversation. Fame arrived suddenly, but David remained grounded. He didn't chase celebrity or indulge in spectacle. Instead, he focused on refining his sound. The album's success confirmed something he already knew. Sincerity travels further than showmanship. Honoring Syd through sound, midway through the 1970s, Pink Floyd entered a deeply reflective period. Wish You Were Here emerged as both a tribute to Syd Barrett and an exploration of absence. David's guitar became a vessel for memory and longing. The opening notes of Shine On You Crazy Diamond feel like a slow sunrise, gently unfolding grief and gratitude at once. David poured quiet emotion into every phrase, allowing listeners to experience loss without explanation. The album wasn't about technical achievement, it was about connection. For David, it was personal. Syd's struggles had left a lasting mark, and music became a way to process what words could not. These recordings showed his growing maturity as an artist. He had learned to let vulnerability guide his playing, trusting that honesty would resonate. In doing so, he created some of the most moving moments in rock history. Creative tension and silent dialogue. As Pink Floyd evolved, creative differences began to surface, particularly between David Gilmour and Roger Waters. Waters leaned toward political themes and conceptual narratives, while David favored emotional intuition and musical atmosphere. Albums like Animals reflected this contrast. Rather than confront disagreements publicly, David responded through his guitar. On tracks such as Dogs, his playing added humanity to sharp social commentary. The tension didn't destroy the band, it shaped it. Each perspective pushed the other, creating layered music that invited reflection. David rarely argued in interviews or sought control through words. His contribution came through tone and timing. Even during challenging sessions, he stayed focused on the sound itself. This quiet perseverance helped maintain balance during uncertain years. While creative conflicts simmered beneath the surface, David remained committed to crafting music that felt authentic, choosing harmony over ego whenever possible. Comfortably Numb and Emotional Immortality. When The Wall was released in 1979, its scale was enormous. Yet amid the theatrical production and heavy concepts, one moment stood apart. David Gilmour's solo on Comfortably Numb, it wasn't flashy or fast. It was deliberate, aching, and deeply human. Every bend felt like a breath, every sustained note like a heartbeat. Listeners didn't just hear it, they felt it. That solo became a defining moment not only for the album, but for David's career. It demonstrated his rare ability to translate vulnerability into sound. While much attention centered on the album's narrative, David's guitar provided emotional release. He proved that music could carry compassion even in grand productions. Decades later, that solo still moves audiences worldwide. It stands as a reminder that true artistry lies not in complexity, but in connection. Taking the lead with Grace Roger Waters left Pink Floyd in 1985, and many believed the band would end there. Instead, David quietly stepped forward. He didn't announce leadership or seek validation. He simply continued working. Albums like A Momentary Lapse of Reason and The Division Bell reflected his gentle guidance. These records focused on atmosphere, memory, and reconciliation rather than confrontation. Songs like High Hopes look back with warmth, acknowledging both growth and loss. David approached this era with humility, honoring Pink Floyd's legacy while allowing space for renewal. He assembled musicians, refined arrangements, and rebuilt confidence from the ground up. His leadership style mirrored his playing, calm, patient, and emotionally aware. Without drama or spectacle, he carried the band forward, proving that creativity can survive change when guided by respect and quiet determination. Discovering himself beyond the band, David's solo career offered a more personal window into his artistry. His self-titled debut in 1978 revealed a blues-rooted, introspective side free from large concepts. About Face followed in 1984, showing greater confidence and range. Years later, On an Island marked a deeply reflective chapter. Working closely with his wife Polly Sampson, David explored themes of family, memory, and aging. The album felt intimate, like pages from a private journal. Rattle That Lock continued this journey, blending rock with ambient textures and poetic storytelling. His solo work doesn't chase trends or charts. Instead, it reflects a man growing older with curiosity and grace. Each record feels thoughtful and unhurried, shaped by lived experience. Through these projects, David demonstrated that artistic evolution doesn't require reinvention, only honesty. Performing as shared meditation, David Gilmour's live performances feel less like concerts and more like collective reflection. Shows such as Live at Dansk and Live at Pompeii reveal his cinematic approach to sound. Whether backed by orchestras or stripped-down ensembles, he creates immersive landscapes where audiences can simply listen and feel. He doesn't command attention through theatrics. He invites people into the music. His presence on stage is calm, focused, and sincere. Every performance becomes a shared moment, shaped by atmosphere and emotional flow. Rather than rushing through songs, he allows space for resonance. These concerts highlight his belief that music should breathe. Fans leave not energized by spectacle, but moved by connection. For David, live performance is not about perfection. It's about presence, about meeting listeners where they are and guiding them gently through sound. A life rooted in love and privacy. Away from the spotlight, David Gilmour lives quietly. His first marriage to Ginger Gilmour spanned nearly 2 decades and brought stability during Pink Floyd's busiest years. After their separation, he married writer Polly Sampson in 1994, forming both a personal and creative partnership. Polly's lyrics have deeply influenced his later work, adding emotional clarity and poetic depth. Together, they built a family life away from public attention. David values privacy, choosing countryside calm over celebrity culture. His home is a place of creativity, reflection, and connection. He gardens, writes, records, and spends time with loved ones. This balance grounds him. Fame never defined his identity. Instead, relationships and artistic expression guide his days. His personal life mirrors his music, quiet, thoughtful, and centered on what truly matters. integrity in action. David Gilmour's values extend beyond music. In 2019, he auctioned his iconic Black Stratocaster and other guitars, raising millions for environmental causes. It wasn't a publicity move. It was a reflection of his belief in responsibility. He supports humanitarian efforts and stands by his principles without grand gestures. When speaking out, he does so thoughtfully, choosing clarity over confrontation. His actions consistently align with his character. He doesn't separate art from ethics. To him, success carries obligation. Whether supporting charities or advocating for compassion, he acts quietly but decisively. These choices reinforce what fans have long sensed. David Gilmour is guided by empathy. He understands that influence carries weight, and he uses his platform with care. In an industry often driven by image, his consistency stands out as rare and refreshing. A legacy of feeling over Flash. David Gilmour reshaped how guitar could be heard in rock music. He showed that emotion matters more than speed, that silence can be as powerful as sound. His influence reaches musicians across generations, from Mark Knopfler to John Frusciante. Yet his greatest contribution isn't technical, it's emotional. He helped build Pink Floyd's immersive soundscapes, creating music that invites reflection rather than demand attention. Albums like Dark Side of the Moon, Wish You Were Here, and The Wall remain timeless because they speak to universal experiences. David's playing teaches patience, listening, and empathy. He reminds artists that authenticity lasts longer than trends. His legacy lives not only in records, but in moments of quiet connection shared by listeners worldwide. That is his true achievement. When silence speaks, loudest David Gilmour never chased legend. He simply followed feeling, one note at a time. Through decades of music, he demonstrated that strength can be gentle and that depth often lives in restraint. His career is a testament to emotional honesty, creative patience, and quiet courage. In a world that celebrates volume and visibility, he chose stillness and sincerity. His guitar continues to comfort, inspire, and heal, reaching people in ways words cannot. Every sustained note carries reflection. Every melody invites understanding. David Gilmour's story reminds us that true impact doesn't require noise. Sometimes, the softest voice leaves the deepest mark. And in that space between sound and silence, his music continues to speak, calmly, beautifully, and forever.